Nuestra buena práctica trata sobre la desviación iniciada por la policía para prevenir futuros comportamientos delictivos. Esta buena práctica está dirigida a los jóvenes y fue creada en Australia, Canadá, Estados Unidos y Reino Unido. El principal problema era que debido a la mala conducta de los jóvenes se tomaban medidas extremas por parte del sistema de justicia penal. Como solución se buscaron medidas alternativas judiciales más leves, ya que una condena más dura no significa la reducción de la reincidencia.
Vamos a poner un fragmento de la entrevista que le hemos realizado a Dave Wilson, un profesor de Criminología de Estados Unidos que hizo una revisión de esta buena práctica. Dos de las preguntas que le realizamos fueron: ¿cuál es el objetivo de la práctica? Y si él cree que esa forma de actuar funcionaría hoy en día. What was the main objective you wanted to achieve by implementing this program?
The main objective of these diversion programs is to reduce delinquency, right? So that's the policy goal is to sort of reduce the extent to which sort of first-time low-risk youth engage in continued sort of delinquent behavior. I think if we step back at the level of the work that I did, I think the goal is to help shape policy and to sort of encourage, given the results, to encourage greater use of police-led diversion. When we think about diversion, diversion can occur at many points in the criminal justice system. And so there's a lot of diversion of youth that occurs after they've been arrested. So they get arrested, they sort of get processed, but then they get diverted before going to before a judge. But at that point, they've got an arrest record. And so this study was actually focusing on super early at the level of the interaction between a police officer and a youth. And not even sort of arresting them and sort of diverting them at that stage. Some of the studies diverted them and referred them to various sort of services like mental health services, et cetera. Others didn't, but this is sort of diverting them very, very early on in the process before they get processed further in the system. And this seems to be beneficial. And so I think that sort of one of the other motivations that I would have, given the results, would be to sort of encourage at a policy level, adopting more policies that are supportive of allowing police officers to do this and that create clear sort of guidelines for how and when officers should use these programs. That make sense?
Yes. Do you think this way of taking action will work nowadays?
Will work nowadays? Yes, at least in the US context. So, I don't think that youth have changed significantly despite what people, complain about the new generations. It's like, no, I mean, if anything, I think youth during my generation were probably more poorly behaved than the current youth, at least if statistics are to be believed. And so, and I think that sort of these underlying principles that low-level behavior there should be consequences, right? I think, as a society and as sort of, everything we know about human development, developmental psychology, parenting, that, when youth misbehave, there needs to be a consequence. But we need to think about, well, what level of consequence, right? Minor misbehavior should have a minor consequence, right? And one that probably, and another important, I think, principle from sort of developmental psychology is, and if you sort of think about good parenting, when parents sort of discipline a child, effective discipline is over soon, right? So that, you can get back to being normal, right? So, any discipline needs to sort of be proportional to what was done, and you need to get past it so that then that's the past, right? Well, one of the problems with bringing youth into the juvenile justice system is now you have a record, and often the system progresses slowly, and this thing can get dragged out for months, right? And then maybe you're on probation for 6 months. And if the wrong that you committed was fairly minor, having sort of a short consequence, which might just be getting chewed out by the police officer, getting chewed out by your parents, and then, the next day or the day after that, life goes back to normal, right? In that it's just sort of a short-term consequence that you can get past, and you have no sort of permanent sort of consequence, right? You can then recover from. And I think that and this is just my hypothesizing here, right? My study did not demonstrate why these programs work, right? So it's theory that we have to use to try to think why. But I think this is part of why, is that, the consequences is a little more proportional to the misbehavior, and there's no sort of permanent long-term consequences for the youth. So the youth has an opportunity to sort of get back on good terms. Whereas if the punishment is long-term, that's sort of like, why should I behave, right? I might as well just keep misbehaving if I'm going to be punished for 6 months, right? And be on probation for 6 months. It's kind of like, screw it, right? And so I think that's some of the dynamics here. And so I do think that it would still work today. The degree to which it works across countries would, I think, depend on how punitive the juvenile justice system is to begin with. If it's a fairly light touch juvenile justice system, then there might not be a big difference between what they currently do and what a diversion program would look like. And that would then suggest it might be a little less effective.
Okay, I agree with you.
Como conclusión, los programas y enfoques de desviación para los jóvenes sin recurrir a sanciones legales como la imposición de cargos formales está demostrada que funciona para disminuir la futura reincidencia de los jóvenes delincuentes. Un aspecto importante a tratar es la necesidad de castigo para poder ejercer de aprendizaje. La clave está en qué grado o nivel de consecuencia. Luego, un mal comportamiento leve necesita de una consecuencia leve, puesto que una condena más dura no significa una mayor reducción de la reincidencia, y a su vez, una solución demasiado leve puede no servir debido a ser demasiado permisiva. El objetivo de la desviación es que los jóvenes maduren hasta la edad adulta sin verse negativamente influenciados por su participación en el sistema judicial. Así pues, poder disuadir al joven y saber implementar un castigo equivalente al grado de seriedad del delito cometido sirve de gran importancia para la reducción de la tasa de reincidencia de los jóvenes.